Welcome to the Rainmaker Multiplier on Demand, a podcast for leading financial professionals, or rainmakers, and their teams that offer support for securing a successful future. From marketing help to staffing structure, listen and subscribe for actionable insights from advisors and skilled professionals alike.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Rainmaker Multiplier on Demand. I am your host for today, Matt Seitz, Chief Marketing Officer here at C2P. And we have a fun episode today, a little different one, a recap of a recent conference that myself and some of our team members attended, the Jolt conference. It's the big Snappy Kraken conference. They have been a great partner to ours here. And they always put on a great show. I think this might be their fourth one that they've had. And we had a few team members in attendance, and two of them are here to join me today as we kind of have a little roundtable discussion going through kind of our best takeaways from there. And so joining us, Cary Chaitoff and Chelsea Konst, thank you for joining us today.
Awesome to be here. Thanks, Matt and Chelsea, for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to start this one off in a little unorthodox way than we do most of our podcasts here with a quick side story, because a lot of us and those listening or watching, you've probably uttered that phrase that you are starting your week putting out fires. Well, we actually kicked this conference off doing just that. And a little bit of a fire alarm per se to kick things off. And Cary, you were live on the scene documenting this for us. So do you mind sharing how we kicked things off at Jolt this year?
Sure. And thanks to Snappy Kraken and the other sponsors. As I look at the definition of Jolt, is to convey the idea of providing a sudden shock or stimulating boost. Well, I can tell you when the alarm went off at the Renaissance downtown, approximately 1:30 a.m., and you heard over the loudspeakers, attention, attention, and they had all 26 plus floors evacuate because there was a fairly large fire across the street in a garage. We walked out and to our chagrin, we saw lots of smoke, and fortunately we can laugh about it because nobody was hurt. Thankfully, yes. and Nashville Police Department, Fire Department did an excellent job, kept everyone safe. But clearly it was a jolt when you wake up in the middle of the night. So we certainly experienced Jolt at its highest level.
Yes, they promised a jolt, and we got things started just with that. No, thank you. And, I think we share some of our pictures there. But like you said, easier to laugh about knowing that everyone was okay and that it happened during the night and after the fact. So jumping into the actual content from the conference, we'll kick things off just like they did there with their keynote talking about being different is more important than being better. And I think that resonated, I know, with the three of us and our fourth Kalen West that was there from our team over at JL Smith. And you kind of saw that theme resonate too, throughout the conference. And we've even had a handful of discussions on that after. So Cary, do you mind kind of giving an overview there, and then we'll turn to kind of Chelsea in terms of how that segued into the messaging and the niche discussions, but what they meant by that of being different is more important than being better.
Sure. And we all grew up and with our parents, or we probably tell our children, be better, be better, be better. And certainly we try to behave that way. Some of us do it better than others. But what's real insight there for financial advisors that are listening is the idea of being different is a differentiator. No pun intended. But when you think about, how do I prove that I'm better? And how do you prove that you're different? And so 80% of people say they're a better driver. And of course, we know that only 50% of people can be a better driver. 90% say they're more intelligent, of course, than the average person. Of course, the average person would be 50. So we have a kind of a self-inflated perspective of what is better. But when you ask people, is it better to be better or to be differentiated? The differentiated is actually a smaller number. And why that's so important in the financial services sector is how do you differentiate yourself and your firm from all others? And so I want everyone to think about, how are you different from the mass number of financial advisors across the country or in your specific area? we'll talk a little bit today about niches and how to define. But not only is it important to be different, but you have to be authentic, right? So don't be different to be to say, well, I'm just different. People read through that very quickly. So think about what it means to be better and what it means to be different.
Yeah. So if I could just sort of piggyback on that, specifically being different, when you talk about people who are ultra performers, those are people who have taken being different and used it to their benefit. So, essentially amplifying their ideal prospect scenario and working out how to continue to outperform in that area. And that goes to your point, Cary, of niching down. Everyone or many people in this industry right now in marketing, they're trying to outdo each other. So, as you mentioned, being better. But when everyone is trying to be better, then you get sort of this homogenization of everything. So you're really just competing in a way that everyone sort of becomes the same. That's why being different ends up taking you to that next level. And these ultra performers in the industry are admired for their noteworthy ability to overdo what they do well, essentially. And so if you think about the animal kingdom, actually, that sort of can bring this point home. So, a peacock, for example, they really have overdone what they do well, which is being able to stand out. And that's their identity, that's their brand. So, from a branding perspective, making sure that you know yourself, you know who you serve and who you serve best, and doubling down on that.
I think that's a great point, Chelsea. As you think about the wild kingdom, you think about kind of the mass number of animals, and in the herd, you may identify one particular animal out of the herd. And what is it? Because they're better? No, because there's something different about them. Maybe they have different stripes. Maybe it's a dog with more ferocious teeth, cute dogs and all of that. How do they separate themselves from others? So I think it's important to kind of be different in a way that you stand out.
And we heard a lot of examples of that. That's why I think this carried forward throughout is a lot of the other speakers, main stage, and even some of the breakouts were sharing what made them different and how that made them successful. Because they tied that back to the phrase we've all heard, especially those that have gone through the story brand framework of people like to be fascinated, but they love to be fascinating. And what's your differentiator that ties you to your audience, that draws your target audience in? I guess Chelsea's kind of coming back to the niche audiences, how can you position yourself to be different that resonates with the audience that you're trying to attract?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think if we think about messaging in our industry, this sort of touches back on that. If we're trying to be better, we're all saying the same thing. You need to make sure that whatever you're saying is speaking to your target audience. And that's important. You have to start by knowing who your target is. Speak to your target audience's most urgent need or highest aspiration. So some language that we always find in this industry that's commonly used, calling yourself trusted, experienced, authentic, personalized. Now, these are off limits words, and they can actually quite effectively convey your value proposition. However, you need to make sure you're using them strategically, because otherwise they're just filler words. For example, trusted, that's the lowest common denominator for a financial advisor. Essentially, it's just filler. It's taking up space unless you're identifying a specific proof of process in which you become trusted with a client over time. So again, just always speaking to your target audience's most urgent need or highest aspiration. And again, identifying those niches and marrying those niches based on your team's expertise. Making sure you know your client's problems, identifying that, knowing what your solution is, and then on top of that, applying your advantage. So if I could just give an example, if an example problem would be, what am I going to do with my life and retirement to have meaningful experiences? Then the solution would be, a general basic investment or tax plan. However, you take that to the next level with marketing once you layer on your unique advantage, your differentiating quality. So then that message becomes, how do you solve your client's most urgent need of wanting to live a meaningful life in retirement? Well, we go beyond just a basic tax and investment plan and deliver consistent top tier service and keeping stable eye on what our clients need. That's just a quick example, but that's sort of how you can turn it up a notch and make sure that you're taking your messaging and marketing to the next level.
On the niches, I think it's an important element that when you kind of talk about the sea of sameness, and you can't be all things to all people. And one test I want our listeners or viewers to do is look at your website. And if it speaks to everybody, that's a problem. So I want you to look at your website and say, when I go to that home page, who am I speaking to? Is a very specific niche. Maybe it's a segment, maybe it's an occupation, maybe it's a community. Who are you talking to? Conversely, who are you not talking to? So I want you to kind of think, who would come to this site and not agree or not align with this message? And if that message alienates anybody, then kudos. It means you're not talking to everybody. So really important, because there's so many websites out there that you could really change the logo and it looks one and the same. So think about your messaging. And again, this is about being different. And so how is your site different? I'm not necessarily talking about visually. I'm talking about what that message is and who you're talking to.
Yeah. And that's kind of a good segue into our next point too, because we talk about like getting the messaging down first. And I know you two, especially, both work on that with our agency clients that we work with here. But for the advisors that are, especially at a conference like that, they're saying we're in growth mode. I want to hit the ground running. I want to come out of here with ideas and I want to grow fast. They really talked about the importance of that mindset shift of going from being reactive to being proactive, especially in terms of your marketing and biz development. Like if you want to be in that growth mode or ultra growth mode, you can't sit back and wait for referrals. And that, that happens traditionally. I won't say now, but traditionally in this industry. And if you want to be at the forefront, you have to change that mindset to being more proactive in your marketing and business development approach. And that's starting with that documented strategy, helping you avoid the shiny object syndrome, as we call it, to keep you focused with the eye on the prize of what are your growth goals. So, Cary, we touched on this a little bit last week at our Mastermind Collegium, but maybe we could start with you of talking about the takeaways that you had in terms of how to go from reactive to being more proactive in that approach.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we look at it from almost two different perspectives. One is, how are you proactive with your client base? And think about when you try to grow from a business development point, one perspective is, how do I grow with my existing client base? And typically people think of referrals, and that's critically important. It's Matt, you've already brought up the importance of referrals, and we can do a whole podcast on referrals at a later point. But I want to put that aside for now. Think about your individual clients and what share of wallet do you have for them? Is there an opportunity to grow assets with people that you're already working for or working with, And I also want you to start thinking about, how do I start penetrating the next generation? So I'm working with grandparents or I'm working with parents, and how do I get that next generation? Because many of you are working with million plus assets, investable assets, higher, or you certainly desire larger balances, portfolio sizes. Now, there's a staggering number that says 70% of all advisors lose the next generation. So oftentimes I hear advisors say, well, unfortunately, my book isn't growing and my clients are dying off. And I want to challenge that thought of, that's not necessarily a way to approach your older clients. It's how do you understand their next generation? So I think part of this is understanding, in terms of being proactive, your existing client base. And then the other part is being proactive with prospects, people that you don't currently have a relationship with. And maybe, Chelsea, you want to talk a little bit about that in terms of the importance of digital and being proactive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this applies to both, your current clients' next generation. So, your current clients' children and grandchildren. So creating that like built-in referral network, but also when it comes to prospects, because 68% of investors under 60 say they made their advisor choice via digital channels. And that's from 2024. And I would bet that that number is just going to keep going up as the years go on because we are in a digital world now. And speaking to sort of the disconnect that lies within this industry's marketing, your clients love you. And if you can build that built-in referral network with their next generations, that's great. But your prospects, they don't know you and they don't trust you. So it's the same advisor, but these are two different experiences and you're trying to capture both of them. So you need to mend that disconnect because these first impressions aren't made in the office anymore. You need to turn interest into action before the first call with these prospects. And just again, speaking sort of to that next generation, needing to capture them, just a couple of their stats, 50% of investors say social media plays a vital role in who they choose as an advisor. And I know that can be intimidating to some advisors because they might be like, I'm not really sure where to start where it comes to my social media plan or strategy, or I don't even have a social media platform. So this is the time that you should start engaging because, again, I think these numbers are only going to go up. And I know Gen Z is not many advisors' targets right now, but keeping your focus on the data, where that data is going, that's going to help you make sure that you don't wait until your referrals dry up and then you're like, oh, wait, where are my leads? Because then it'll be too late.
Yeah. And I know we've talked about it before, like on podcasts and webinars here, talking to advisors about really on the digital side, especially focusing first on after the messaging, the website, social media, and Google My Business. Because if someone hears about you, even if it's from a referral or from an ad, more often than not, they're going to one of those three sources to find out more information on you. And just as AI is evolving in terms of how we're using it here, consumers are evolving in how they're using it. So now, even when looking at your website, you have to look to be, optimizing the SEO for your site, but also looking how can you optimize it for AI, for Chat GPT, for the consumers that are starting to use that more. How can you be found and incorporating things like Q&A into your website, things like that. So, Cary, I know our team and your team are working with our advisors on that, but even speaking to that of how we're evolving, how we're structuring, website and social media strategy to evolve and help advisors.
Yeah, I think we're seeing more and more about not only proactive in terms of creating content and social content. And one thing that our advisors have to think about is the videos we produce or the content we post on social media isn't necessarily just competing with other content from other financial advisors. So oftentimes people say, well, I love my market commentary. It's very insightful relative to others. And certainly that's to be commended. But you are competing with the 500 other reels and the other, people that I embarrassed to admit there's times where I'm on YouTube or Facebook reels and I look up and it's 40 minutes later and I'm thinking, what did I just watch? Right. And it's easy to kind of pass through the next one. And so the importance of video in terms of not only social, but also on the website. It also allows, we were referencing, someone to really get to know you before they even have a conversation with you. It goes back to be authentic. And how does this person present themselves? What are they wearing? Perhaps on Facebook, their personal Facebooks, what are their interests? And again, it's okay if someone doesn't like everything about you. Be different. And I think that's what we're really trying to do with our websites of more and more who we serve is just as important as who we don't serve. So that's some of the things we're looking at. And certainly SEO is critical, search engine optimization of how you say things, using the key phrases, doing the research of what phrases people are searching into their browsers are a focus of Chelsea, myself, and the rest of the team.
Yeah, just to sort of follow up on that, as you were saying, Matt, sort of incorporating the question and answer format, that's really helpful, because we do have to bridge that delicate balance of optimizing for the search engine, but now this sort of new era of search engine, which is sort of the AI summary. And also, using sort of questions and unique content, that's going to go far when you're trying to tell your story as well. Because I think a big blind spot for advisors is crafting the right story and the right value proposition and boiling that down in a way that is not only Google friendly, but AI friendly. And so that sort of just goes into how to craft a website page that is ideal when it comes to being found, but also being digested by the average person. Because again, it's always that balance. What are sort of the robots going to like, but also what's going to resonate with human people? And that's something that we learned at this conference. Humanity is more critical than ever. That is something that, the personalization, bringing in the human element, people are starting to get fatigue with all of this constant technological change. It's not going to go anywhere, and people are embracing it more than ever, but people are going to start craving that that human element.
Right. So we covered some of the opening sessions there and some of the themes we saw that ended up carrying throughout. Cary, I'll come back to you. Was there a particular session or sessions that maybe resonated with you the most, or you thought kind of would be most beneficial to our audience?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about kind of your niche audience and some examples that I've seen in previous organizations is our financial advisors or firms that focus specifically on an industry such as dental, and that's really easy. When you go, it's all about dentists, and they go to the dental associations, and they are one only a handful in the country. We had a lovely advisor that talked about her community and being part of the LGBTQ community. And she's very open about that. And she understands that her personal views may not be aligned with everyone's. And she says, I embrace that. If my thoughts aren't aligned with you, don't do business with me. And it goes back to what we talked about of it's okay if you aren't appealing to everybody. In fact, I would say it's much better when you don't appeal to everyone. There's another gentleman that we talk about industries and kind of occupation. Certainly people say, well, I focus on business executives with, stock options. There's another gentleman that really focused on presenting everything around the wrapper of being joy. And this advisor talked about, he had a t-shirt that says, what brings you joy? And really positions everything that he talks to from the initial right fit calls to the alignment calls to onboarding. And it is less about the charts and the pie charts and the numbers as it is the meaning behind it, the aspirations, and where his clients and prospects want to go. Of course, that's not for everybody. There are plenty of investors that just I want that 12% return. I want this number. But he really talked about that's where he made the emotional connections. And that's what he finds most fulfilling about what he does and really is positioned quite uniquely. So I really enjoyed that aspect. I'll turn it over to Chelsea, and then I'll jump into some other takeaways.
Yeah. I think the one that I really enjoyed was something that focused on sort of, I think it was called homepage to handshake, the website formula that, turns visitors to clients. And obviously, I think that it's a little overstated only because there isn't one exact formula that works. However, there are best practices, and it sort of just boiled down some of the best practices that us marketers know, but maybe advisors don't know. And so that's what I liked. I think we all liked going to this conference so we could nerd out a little bit, but I liked seeing how they boiled them down into 5 sort of pillar things that you should include on your homepage to make those conversions and start that conversation before you've even had the first conversation with them, that trust generator. So they had empathetic headline was the first one. So for example, worried about your retirement plan, you're not alone. That again, that includes a bit of a question. So I think it's just a way to sort of ensnare. A video that humanizes was number 2. So who are you? What challenges do you solve? Those basic things. And again, that kind of goes back to bringing in video in this emerging era of AI, because that human element is key, and putting a face to a name, I think that's really key at first. So showing them I'm a real person. This is what I do. This is who I am. And then number 3, a why that differentiates. So putting that straight on your homepage, exactly what Cary was saying. What's your differentiator? Why did you start doing what you do? Why are you passionate about this industry? Go beyond, I manage investments. That's not what people want to hear, especially not high net worth clients. They have their pick of the litter. They want to know what makes you different. And then the last 2, a client-centric navigation. This I would say is probably the more boring one. It's basically, don't clunk up your navigation bar on your website with 500 things. Keep it simple, keep it clean, and organized by need. What are people looking for immediately? And then last one, just a CTA that lowers the barrier. I think we use this a lot on the agency side, Cary, but just for people who are making it a little more complex, bring it down. So maybe if you're saying something like schedule a comprehensive planning meeting, that's a little bit formal and it sounds like a bigger commitment than people who are just learning who you are ready to make. But a lower barrier is let's chat. I think we see that a lot more now. But so those 5 things, I thought it was nice to see sort of just like a basic framework. Obviously, there's a lot of different things that you can add on to that and you should add on to that. But that one interested me a lot.
No, I'm glad you brought that into. I like that session because I think it was the third point, the sharing your why on the site, and even the fact that they shared that it can be uncomfortable sometimes to share that story, but if you can bring that out, as the lead advisor, the founder, whoever you are, that's going to help make that connection and build that rapport. We've talked before too about, you hear the know, like, trust. People want to do business with people they know, like, and trust. Well, so much of that has to be done through thought leadership these days, because you shared that statistic earlier of so many consumers are doing their research up front before they ever pick up the phone and call. So you have to try and establish that know, like, trust in the content on your website, through your social media, through those videos, through the thought leadership you're sharing on there. So if you can get vulnerable, if you can be humble and share your stories through there and pull the why out to put that out there, I think you're going to be able to start establishing that know, like, trust before they reach out through that call to action. Cary, you shared, after Chelsea went through one of her sessions, that you said you had a couple more takeaways. Was there something else you wanted to add on that side?
Yeah, I love the focus, and this kind of almost permeated through many of the speakers in terms of the human connection. Chelsea referenced that a little bit, and someone used an example of market downturn that certainly we've experienced earlier in March, April timeframe earlier this year, and the unaware, the unentitled, kind of said their reaction to the market downturn is, well, do I really need to communicate to my clients because they already know? I don't understand why they're all upset. They know it's a long-term plan. We talk about this every time. Why do they even call me? The majority said, I'm going to come up with a market information, and I'm going to explain why the tariffs and international issues and everything going on is impacting the market to explain, right? That's generally what most of the advisors did. The people that really had the empathy reached out and talked to their clients one-on-one and were a sounding board. Your job is not to make clients feel invisible. Your clients want to be heard, and you want to encourage them to call, because when they call with emotion, you're getting information, right? And so what are their true worries? What are their true concerns? And you can kind of use that to help them plan. And when things go astray, you can kind of keep them on what their goals are. And again, it's not just about the numbers. And I thought that was really kind of just a reminder of why so many of our advisors are in business, is to make a difference in people's lives. And that's, that's really, really important. And it even goes down to the information you track in your CRM. And everyone needs to have a CRM. I don't think we're going to get into necessarily where all your leads are coming from, but what are your clients, when they come to the office, what do they like to eat? Wouldn't it be silly if you bought cookies and donuts and you found out they were gluten-free, right? What if you sent a bottle of wine and you realize people don't drink? What do you know about them and their family? Whether they, again, like sports, they like theater, what is interesting? And then perhaps if you were to buy them a, holiday present or, a congratulatory a gift for hitting a milestone, that's very personable. And it's not even about what you're spending, but it's the time that you took to get a blanket of their favorite football team with their name engraved. But do you know your client's favorite sport or something like that? So I think all of this really needs to be documented. One place where I used to work, we used to send out a survey. What do they like? Because you know what? If they like diet soda, how hard is it to send somebody down the street to buy, a diet soda opposed to, whatever their favorite drink is. Take that little extra step. It's about personalization. You need to make sure your clients feel trusted and comfortable calling you, because if they don't, that's where the referrals stop.
Yeah. And I know, Cary, we were talking about this a couple of days ago too, about just that theme of the power of data. And it was interesting because even you and I took that theme a little differently, because there's obviously, like you're saying, the personal data to make it a better prospect and client experience, where I was looking at more from the ROI, the campaign results. Neither one is right or wrong, but it just stresses the importance of tracking and documenting that in general, like you said, in a CRM, and whether you have like a client CRM and a marketing CRM, but being able to gather that data and then do something with it. Don't just gather it and let it sit. Data as information means nothing. Data as insight is powerful. And if you're gathering that and you don't know what to do with it, that's when you need to reach out to other networks, to outsource providers, to, groups like ours, to be able to help put that information into action. And like you said, both from a personalization standpoint, but from a campaign ROI optimization standpoint as well.
Matt, I just spoke with an advisor a few hours ago, and they were talking about developing content for life insurance term policies that are about to expire. And the comment was, some of these folks we haven't talked in 10 years when we originally wrote the policy. And I want to challenge all of you, because even if you have the insurance, why did they initially buy it, right? What were their kids and how did their lives change? And so now when you're approaching them back to renew or do a life insurance conversion, term insurance, that you can already talk to them again on an emotional, personal level versus here's why you need life insurance. So just kind of, again, if that's in your CRM, why did they buy it 10 years ago? And shame on you for not having talked to someone in 10 years.
Yes.
A transaction versus a relationship.
Right. It goes back to being proactive. Be as proactive as you are about getting new leads as taking care of the people that you already have, communicating with them. So, yeah.
No, thank you for that. I guess as we kind of wrap up here, Cary, I'll start with you first. Like, any last minute nugget of advice that you picked up throughout the week, or any particular item that we've already hit on that you want to make sure we reinforce before we close?
I would just kind of reemphasize, be different, make sure your firm is different, and personalize. And it all loops back to creating a strong brand, and that's how you get noticed.
Great. And Chelsea?
I would say niching down, making sure that and also knowing your why, niching down, because those things go hand in hand. And when you're trying to articulate your value proposition, do it in a way that's unique to you. Obviously, being different, that's the first thing, but going that step further when it comes to crafting messaging, stay away from what's typically used. Push yourself to choose messaging and branding elements that are completely new to you. It might be uncomfortable, but I guarantee you'll see results.
I like it. Get comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Love that. Yes.
So thank you both for attending, and thank you both for bringing all that knowledge and thought leadership back to here to share with our audience here today. Thank you to our audience for tuning in. We hope you are already a subscriber. If not, be sure to subscribe to the Rainmaker Multiplier On Demand for more great content from us. And at that, have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Never miss an episode by subscribing now to discover new resources and strategies. Visit c2penterprises.com to learn how we can help scale and secure your business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable, but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.